Hello, and welcome to Retroscoping, a podcast tracing the evolution of feature animation. We are journeying through the films of the studio that started it all, Walt Disney Studios. And today, we've hit film 14, Peter Pan. But first, a bit about us. I'm your host, Alexa.
And I'm your other host, Nathan.
And Nathan, why are we qualified to run this podcast?
We do believe in fairies. We do.
We do!
Because we've been to the forests of Scotland, and they are definitely haunted by the Fae people.
They are beautiful and gorgeous, and we should respect them all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is Peter Pan. Although, I suppose in the Disney film Peter Pan, you don't have the I do believe in fairies, I do sequence. That is a sequence from the stage show and musical versions, of which there are many. Peter Pan has been adapted a lot of times in a lot of different ways, including an early silent film version, which I've actually heard is really cool, although I've never gotten a chance to see it, and features some really exciting special effects in terms of the ship flying. It would be an interesting thing for us to track down. And of course, the play has been performed in lots of different ways, and there have been, I think, about 2 or 3 film adaptations of the play musical, as well as a live-action traditional Peter Pan film from some years back starring Jerry Sumter, and
there's just so many live-action Peter Pan films. Like, there's 2015, there was the one that they did on NBC as a musical. Mm-hmm. The Hook is great.
Hook is great. There was Pan.
Yeah, there's too many.
It's a popular story, is what we're saying. And but I do think that Disney's version remains one of the most iconic.
For sure. Absolutely.
If only because it is, I think, one of the just most iconic images of flying on film. I feel like this film really invented a certain language for how people fly. That this is how I fly in my dreams when I fly.
Aww. That makes me very happy. I mean, it's also how superheroes fly.
Yeah, but at this point, have we seen a Superman? We've probably seen a Superman.
I'm saying that superhero films borrow from this kind of flight, which is exactly what you said earlier. I'm just pretending that I thought of it. That's all.
That'll get you far in the business world.
Exactly.
We may have had a Superman, actually, at this point. I'm not sure when the first animated Superman happened.
Well, I mean, in animation, I think it's obviously really helpful on screen when you don't have any strings to cut out. Mm-hmm. That's very, very useful. Mm-hmm. So it really, really sells the flying aspect on screen. So Peter Pan was released on February 5th of 1953 by RKO Pictures. And this is the last, or almost the last, Disney movie that we're going to see distributed by RKO. So this might be the last time we see that RKO logo. After this, Walt sets up his own distribution company called Buena Vista Film Distribution Company Incorporated.
I know that street.
I know. It's actually a street in Burbank, which is where he got the name. Mm-hmm. So the street existed before the distribution company. And it's still the street where Walt Disney Studios is today. It is immortalized in some of the Disney parks. Particularly, they renamed a lake in Florida, Buena Vista Lake. And there is Buena Vista Street in the entrance area of California Adventure. However, the theme park versions of this street will look so much nicer and so much better than the actual street in real life. Mm-hmm. Buena Vista means literally good view in Spanish, in case you were wondering.
And now it's a freeway on-ramp, right?
It's a lot of things. Oh my gosh, it's so many things now. And the Buena Vista International logo is the one that features Sleeping Beauty's castle, that kind of silhouette with the vertical lines that we all grew up with in the 90s. Mm-hmm. That is their logo.
That is an iconic logo. And I still remember, the first time we saw it in CG for a Pixar film. It was not an improvement.
It was not. So they have done away with the Buena Vista distribution. They've renamed it something else. So we will no longer have such things coming out today. But they did exist for a while. And this is the boring part of history. Thanks for listening. On to bigger and better things.
Yes. Everyone is always super interested in the distribution company behind a film.
We need the distribution people to get the movies. They have important jobs. Thank you for your service to humanity. So Nathan, I know you looked into some of the source material for Peter Pan before we started today's podcast. Was Peter Pan originally a book or a play?
Well, Peter Pan first appeared in parts of J.M. Barrie's 1902 novel, The Little White Bird. Those chapters were later collected in a shorter form and simply titled Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens. Kensington Gardens is where Peter Pan first ran away to. It's where the Lost Boys were lost. It's sort of an important area in the mythos of Peter Pan. And that's why if you visit Kensington Gardens today, you'll find an actually really lovely Peter Pan statue surrounded by fairies. Every time I've gone there, which is twice, there's always parents with their children surrounding the statue, and often the children will be climbing all over the statue, and it's absolutely perfect and appropriate. Kensington Gardens generally is a lovely park, and it's a really great place to just sit and people watch. I highly recommend it should you happen to be in London. After the publication of The Little White Bird and the introduction of Peter Pan in those stories, J.M. Barrie put together a play in 1904, which was called Peter Pan, or The Boy Who Wouldn't Grow Up, and was actually quite successful and was given a Broadway run the following year in 1905. And it was later adapted into a novel, typically called Peter and Wendy, which was released in 1911. I've never seen or read the play. In fact, it's not typically performed. It's been supplanted in most people's imagination by a 1954 musical stage version, which is what most people, I think, know when they think of Peter Pan on stage.
That's the one that I've seen, yeah.
Yeah. The original play was not a musical. I have read the novel, and I'm actually quite fond of it. J.M. Barrie has a really unique voice as a writer, and it manages to balance between a lot of tones. It feels like both a story which he is telling to children. The novel is told sort of in second person. There's a lot of talking to the reader directly. But it's also very sophisticated. A lot of the vocabulary is very smart, and it has just a really striking perspective on Peter Pan as a character. It's really ambivalent on Peter and the idea of never growing up, and it is aware of the charm and the attraction of that idea and that character. But it also is aware of some of the limitations of being a boy who never grows up, and how important it is to be able to move on to a different stage in life and really have meaningful relationships with other people, which is something that Peter seems largely incapable of. I don't think the Disney film is quite that smart or sophisticated, but I will say, rewatching it, I was surprised that I do think it captures some of that ambivalence about Peter as a character. He's, you can easily imagine Peter growing up into the kind of man that we struggle with a lot in the modern day.
The man-child.
The man-child, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Utterly selfish, utterly incapable of empathizing with other people and considering their problems as something more important than his own ego.
Well, I'd blame parents, except he hasn't got them.
Yeah, that's his trouble. That's why he is always on the lookout for a mother that he doesn't really want, but seems to sense he needs.
In previous versions of Peter Pan that they were developing at Disney, there was a storyline where he kidnaps Wendy to be the Lost Boy's mother. They thankfully did not go with that version.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Really, it's just because he doesn't have a mother to tell him otherwise.
Yeah. He doesn't have a mother to teach him what love looks like. And there's actually a lot of tragedy in the novel, which, as your resident melancholy person, really resonates with me. But, you know, the sort of end of the story in the novel has this really lovely line of Wendy and the boys have reunited with their parents, and it's a lovely scene of a family reunited together again, sharing in joy. And the line in the novel is, I'm gonna paraphrase a little bit. Peter looked on from outside the window, a boy who had known innumerable ecstasies which no other child shall ever know, on the one joy from which he must forever be barred.
Aww.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
being a wild, independent child who never has to grow up, has a lot going for it. But you can't have a family that way. And you can't really build relationships that way.
That's the trouble.
Yeah.
In the book, do the Lost Boys stay with Wendy and her family, or do they go back to Neverland?
Yeah, they are adopted into the Darling family.
Okay, so it is much more somber because Peter's now by himself. It's just him and Tinkerbell again.
Yep.
Aw, he's empty nesting.
He is. He's empty nesting as the father he refuses to admit that he is.
Aww.
I'm sure he'll find some other lost boys and he will eventually, recruit Wendy's daughter and Wendy's granddaughter, and so it will go on. This movie opens on a very Battlestar Galactica note.
Oh, does it?
Yeah. Everything in this story has happened before and will happen again. But this time it happened to the Darling family.
Yes. It's a beautiful tracking shot, though, going down over the very blue London.
Mm-hmm.
Ah.
This is the version of London that I dream about.
This is why Peter Pan's adventure at Disneyland is, in fact, the best ride. Because it brings this entire shot to life, and that's the only reason I want to be on the ride. I don't need to go to the whole second half of it. I just want to go around that one room with all the twinkle lights 10 times and then drop me back off at the beginning.
Yeah, I just want to fly around magical fairy tale London.
Precisely.
I'm not that excited about Big Ben, the actual place in London, but Big Ben as fixed in my memory by Peter Pan. Now that is a beautiful image.
I mean, I think Peter Pan as a book, a play, and a movie, like the concept is really all about imagination, right? Yeah. It's not really about how these things are in real life. It's about what does it look like through a child's eyes and after having gone through the little machine that is their imagination.
Yeah.
And what does it look like on the other side?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
for better or for worse.
Neverland is a really interesting idea as the thing that every child has in their head. Every child has some Neverland in their own mind, which is an assemblage of their imagination and all the little facts they've picked up and their little visions of the world, all kind of smashed together on one island. It's really very Inside Out now that I think about it.
That makes sense, actually. Except you only get one island instead of a whole bunch of core personality islands.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I always thought that J.M. Barrie was British, mostly because the statue of Peter Pan's in Kensington Gardens, but he's not British, is he?
Yes, he is.
Well, wait, he's Scottish? Wait.
No, he's...
How do we use the words?
British is a word that includes both English, Scottish, and also Welsh and Northern Irish.
Okay, so he's British and Scottish. I just thought he was from England. Did he live in England?
Yes, so he was born in Scotland. So he's a Scottish novelist and playwright, but he did move to London after finishing his education in Scotland.
Ah, that is new information to me. I had not known that before.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing I learned in my research, sad warning ahead, is that the idea of a boy who would never grow up is actually something that occurred to him because his own brother died in a skating accident the day before he turned 14. And so in their mom's mind, his brother stayed a child forever. And something about that just really, really hit me because we had a family tragedy ourselves. We lost my cousin over a decade ago now, but she was 14. And, she's forever frozen in our minds as that wonderful, vibrant 14-year-old child.
And actually now, thinking about it in that light, it really does make that ending image all the more tragic that, Peter is fixed at that age forever, but there's a future that he never gets to partake in. Yeah. Peter Pan is not a sad movie as Disney has produced it. It is not a sad movie, but there are certain tragic undercurrents in the source material, and I think after 5 or 6 months of COVID, we're all a little on the downside.
I also read a rumor on the internet that when all was said and done, Walt Disney did not care so much for the Peter Pan movie that they had produced. He felt like Peter Pan, the character, was actually kind of cold.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Like, I feel like there's something about this film where it is not as alive as it feels like it should be. There's a certain reserved quality to it.
And yet it's breaking so many S&P rules.
Well, yeah. And there are large parts of it that I just don't think work anymore, and I'm not sure they worked at the time. I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Yeah. So I have great nostalgia for this film because it's all about childhood and that desire to be a child forever. And I was definitely that kid that wanted to be a child for as long as possible. And I 100% think that we should hold on to that kid that we once were. But I think my problems with this film is just that it hasn't aged terribly well. And in the 21st century, where we think a little bit differently about women and their roles,
right.
That was more difficult than I expected to watch because I feel like Wendy is really mistreated in this film, and that was difficult as something like that I want to be able to give to my kids and say, dream about Neverland and flying off to hang out with the Lost Boys and Peter Pan. And I feel like as a kid, I was introduced to Peter Pan with, isn't he wonderful? Isn't he great? We should all be in love with him. And watching it now, I'm like, oh, no.
No.
We should not be telling our children to be in love with Peter Pan. To be in love with being a child, yes. To enjoy silliness and romps and whatnot. But there is a lack of caring and empathy and other things that I think are really big parts of parenting these days, of really trying to add in more kindness and relationships.
Well, I think that's part of the perspective that the novel takes on childhood, is that the famous line from the end of the book is, and so it will go on as long as children are gay and innocent and heartless, which I think captures kind of the book's perspective, which is, yeah, children are happy and they're innocent and they're wonderful, but there is a certain thing that you have to teach them about their responsibility towards one another and their role in creating families and loving one another. That is a big part of growing up. And you can really appreciate the innocence of childhood, but you also have to be able to have a heart and learn to love and care for others.
There's also, like, just developmentally, there is a point where I think up to a certain age, kids just can't understand the gravity of something. And that is something that comes later on in maybe middle school and high school as you begin to, like, really get a deeper sense of the world.
Yeah.
And it is a very important part of growing up. And it is that sort of thing that I think happens around the cusp of, maybe 12, 13, 14, and certainly matures and deepens as you continue on from there for the next decade or so.
And in terms of how this movie has aged and the kind of perspective that it has, I guess I would say this movie and the book are both very, what you might call, gender essentialist. This idea that, like, men are fathers, women are mothers, and they have certain ways that they have to be in the world. And that is very much an artifact of its time. I do think it is, I at least appreciate the way that it is very much aware of, like, both Mr. Darling and Peter are in different ways failing to be good to the women in their lives and are both, in some senses, figures not to be emulated. But
we know we don't want to emulate Mr. Darling.
Yeah.
The trick is that we maybe also don't want to emulate Peter. And I think that's the line that the Disney movie doesn't know how to walk, because they make Peter a hero, or at least they make all the characters around him act like he's a hero, and they don't address the unheroic parts of him.
Yeah. I think they are there, but they're not commented on. They're not responded to.
Well, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah. Which is where, the narrator in the book sort of steps in, but there's no similar role in the movie. So it's just kind of...
so all of that behavior still gets filed under heroic.
Yeah.
This is a hero. This is how heroes act.
Mm-hmm.
There's no commentary like the book does of, maybe we should think harder about this.
Yeah. Which, watching it now as an adult, I definitely find myself aware of those limitations, but I certainly didn't pick up on them as a child.
Oh, no, definitely not. Definitely not. One thing about Peter Pan in this particular movie is Peter's actually played by a boy.
Yeah, which is rare.
Normally, in the stage versions, there's a very long history and tradition of Peter Pan being played by a woman, which I love to think has continued on into voice acting, where many women play the voices of young boys. Timmy Turner, Ben 10, Bart Simpson, and so on and so forth.
Yep. Yeah, the Jeremy Sumpter Peter Pan from
2003
was actually something of a trend breaker in having Peter Pan played by an actual, like, young boy.
Yes, but 1953 did it first. Also, I think it's weird when you get to a live action movie. Like, I think we'd all notice that Peter Pan is a girl, which I'm down for. Like, that could be the next interesting live action movie. Ooh. Yes. Actually, while we're on the subject, one of the Lost Boys, particularly the one that is dressed in the fox outfit, as a child, for some reason, I just decided that kid was the most feminine, and because I was a girl and I was really mad that there could only be Lost Boys, I decided that one was a girl.
Is that hungry for representation?
Yes, I am that hungry for representation. And I like the idea that, you know, I don't think he or she has a name in the film at all. But I like to believe that it is, in fact, a girl who has just, you know, waltzed in with the boys and no one's asked or noticed that actually he's a girl. Or it could be Disney's first trans character.
Sure, why not?
I'm just going to say, you know, that character is the tallest and skinniest in the way that girls kind of shoot up like bean poles. So.
Yeah, I buy it. You told me this before we watched it, and I thought, yeah, that makes sense.
Luscious blonde hair. So whatever that lost boy wants to be, that is the gender they can be.
Yes.
But I'd like to believe that there are like some rules that can be bent about lost boys being boys, which is sort of what the second Return to Neverland was about.
Oh, I have not watched that.
Well, they make Jane the first lost girl. I actually really liked Return to Neverland.
That was one of the ones that got a theatrical release, wasn't it?
It was very sweet and very lovely, and I think beautifully animated. Especially when they have this really great shot towards the end. I haven't rewatched it, but they have this really beautiful shot towards the end where she jumps off or like does the trust fall back. She does trust fall with fairy dust, okay? And she trust falls off the mast of the ship and learns to fly for the first time in the movie, and that shot is just so beautiful.
Peter Pan is not voiced by a woman, as is traditional in stage shows, but I'm going to assume that the same person voices Mr. Darling and Captain Hook.
Yes, Hans Conried.
Which is another stage tradition, is Captain Hook and Mr. Darling are always played by the same actor, which I've never quite figured out what I think that means.
Oh, I think it's very easy. The father, who is very strict in the real world, who is loud and towering and the final say on everything and very practical, who asserts his rules in the real world, is then, in the imaginary world, the duality where he is the pirate villain who is also very loud and towering and trying to assert his dominance. But in the imaginary world, Peter gets the upper hand, whereas in the real world, the kids have to do what Dad says.
And they both share a certain quality of being at heart desperately insecure and just trying to, you know, maintain good form, whatever the heck that actually is.
Good form.
Yes.
Well, okay, so here's the way I think about it, is that it's basically a Rugrats episode, right? Where at the beginning, we're all babies in the living room or the backyard, but then they go into the imaginary playtime and everything around them is transformed. And so it's really just a version of that.
Muppet Babies.
Rugrats.
Muppet Babies was first.
Okay, fine.
But a long tradition.
Why
and you
not
were
both?
there, and you were there, and you were there.
Why not both? All right. I feel like this might be a good time to stop and have a Guess Who, since we're on the subject of voices. Today's Guess Who is the wonderful, delightful Bill Thompson. Some of the roles that he has played is Droopy Dog, which is a Tex Avery cartoon of that saggy white dog who kind of has a droopy voice. And he's also played the White Rabbit in Alice in Wonderland and King Hubert in Sleeping Beauty. And I'll tell you a couple more after you tell me who he plays in this movie.
Does he play Smee?
Smee!
Smee!
Smee! Yes, you're correct. Okay, I'm making these too easy.
Yeah, that was kind of a given. I feel like the White Rabbit and Smee are very similar characters.
Fine. All right. What didn't I say? Next up in Lady and the Tramp, he's going to do 5 different dialects.
Wow.
He's going to be Jock the Scottish Terrier, Bull the Cockney Bulldog, Doxy the German Dachshund, Joe the Italian cook, and the Irish policeman at the zoo. He's also Ranger J. Audobon Woodlore in the Donald Duck and Humphrey the Bear shorts, which I love that character so much. Do you know who I'm talking about?
No idea.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to show you a picture. He's the little round ranger.
Yeah, okay.
Who likes to pick up the litter and has the little glasses. He looks very much like Smee. Like if Smee changed careers at some point and became a park ranger.
Another one. There are lots of really great lines in the novel, and another one that I love is there are many lovable things about Smee, such as, for instance, he wiped his glasses after a fight rather than his weapon.
Cute. He's also Professor Owl in 2 of the music shorts, Melody and Toot Whistle Plunk and Boom. But Professor Owl is that blue owl that we see at the beginning of the sing-along VHSs. That's the shots that they pulled from there. So he's Professor Owl.
Busy man.
And then Uncle Waldo in the Aristocats. He's also the first actor to voice the comic book character Scrooge McDuck.
Ah.
So anyway, Bill Thompson's a delight. I am very impressed by his very long list of cool voices. Lived a good life.
We should all hope to have such a resume.
Yep. All right, what would you like to talk about?
Yeah, so I feel like we've talked a lot about the source material and other versions of this story so far.
We should talk about this one.
Well, in part because this film, it's hard to pin down exactly why, but yeah, it's got those that iconic imagery of London, which really sticks in your mind. It's got the iconic imagery of flying, in particular language of flying that really is so lovely and acrobatic. And yet once they actually get to Neverland, I don't find it to be that interesting.
I'm still just so sad that the mermaids are mean.
This film has a really unfortunate kind of catfight quality to it, with every single female character just fawning over Peter and being mad at Wendy for accompanying Peter. From the mermaids, to the fairies, to Tiger Lily.
All of the women are simultaneously, yes, in love with Peter, and it's like watching The Bachelor.
Yeah. For no good reason.
It drives me nuts.
And Peter's so casually dismissive and forgetful of all of them.
You can do better, ladies. You can do better.
It really is just too close to the current dating scene I witness among our friends.
Oh, yeah. Nope. Maybe that's why I found it so painful.
Yeah. Because I'm going to be honest, I don't love a lot of the design work in this film once we get to Neverland. I don't like the Lost Boys costumes very much. The pirate designs aren't that interesting. The Native American designs are troubling.
Yes, and the entire internet knows it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the entire scene, everything about it.
Yeah.
Nope.
The whole Native American part of the story is always just something that it inherits from the source material.
And it's a problem in the previous source materials as well.
It's a different sort of problem. There's nothing quite like the What Makes the Red Man Red sequence, but, there's a certain degree of after Peter saves Tiger Lily, who I will say in the book, Tiger Lily is captured trying to kill Hook, which makes her a little more awesome. But yeah, after Peter saves her, the Native Americans are groveling at his feet and worshiping him as the great white father.
Father?
Father.
I've seen it both ways.
Father.
I've heard it both ways. Because a feather makes sense. He flies.
I suppose so. Yeah, it's not great. It's not great. The caricatures are really, really unpleasant. What makes the red man red? Sequence is really, really, really racist.
And just purposefully mean.
Yeah.
Right?
It's not something I wanna pass on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised, honestly, on Disney Plus that they have left everything in. Obviously, it'd be a lot shorter without any of that part, but I feel like you could kind of get away with, like, Peter flying away with Tiger Lily and just coming back later with a ceremonial headdress, which he should not be wearing. Anyway, the one thing that really gets me, this is a surprise to no one who has listened to our previous episodes, but the fact that Tiger Lily is so tiny and petite and gorgeous, standing next to a bunch of really intentionally, like, ugly and unappealing designs of the rest of her tribe. And it doesn't make any sense. Like, to literally see her next to the man who's supposed to be her father, and there is no distinction whatsoever aside from the color of their skin and their outfits. Like, it's just, my insides are just...
Yeah. If the Tiger Lily design were more like the rest of the tribe, then actually I think that would be nice, because there is a quality to her design where, yes, she is, like, generically pretty, but there is just an element of a certain slight sense of Native American features in her face, which is respectful and well designed. But yeah, everyone else in the tribe is basically eyeless and angular and
wrinkly.
Yeah, it's not good.
Nope.
It's real bad.
It's not. Once upon a time, though, this was my first introduction to, I think, that first seed of feminism as I watched, because Wendy isn't allowed to join in the, what would you call it, the party? Mm-hmm. She's told that because she's a woman, she has to get firewood and things to, serve the menfolk who are dancing about and having a great time. And I just didn't think that was fair because, of course, as a girl watching this at the tender age of, 5, I wanted to play with the boys and run around and do all the things. And it didn't seem fair that Wendy had to not be at the party. And it made a lot of sense why she storms off and goes home. And I think that is about the point where I decided that I did not want to be a traditional woman person who does the cooking and the cleaning. That sucks. Mm-hmm. And we should also applaud and give many hugs and many presents and treats to all of the wonderful women who do that in our lives. Because it's a lot of work and they need to be more appreciated. And this entire movie is about not appreciating Wendy.
Yeah.
Or appreciating Nana. Man, Nana gets the short end of the stick.
And she's not even playing fetch with it.
I know. Or the short end of the leash.
Yes, there is a strong current of, look at these long-suffering women in this film.
Poor Nana.
Poor Nana.
Poor Nana. Oh.
I forget now. Does in the movie, does Mr. Darling wind up in the kennel?
No, he does not.
No. When
they're not even aware that their children were gone, because that would be bad parenting.
Oh. Yes. Yes, in the book the children have been missing for some time and the parents are distraught, and Mr. Darling has put himself in Nana's kennel for, punishment for being such a bad father and letting his children be taken.
I think also as a kid, I was convinced that, like, if I had a dog, they would act like Nana and do stuff for me. So I think that's part of the reason I wanted a dog.
Yeah. That is, like, that Nana is a great example of the kind of sensibility that I really like about the story. It's the way it kind of rolls with the strangeness of this family and this story and this world, and it's delightful. Of course, like, they couldn't afford a nursemaid, so they got a Newfoundland dog instead, and she takes her job very seriously.
I think Nana as a character does really liven up the real world so that it's not quite so boring. Like, there is still something fun and imaginative to it.
Yeah.
That it's not so terrible when they have to return home. And, like, there is still wonderful and magical things about their world. And it's also interesting to me that really Wendy's journey as a character is at the beginning, she doesn't want to leave the nursery because she doesn't want to grow up. But over the course of the movie, they kind of remind her again and again and again that, you know what? No, you've already grown up. And this is all very difficult for you to live in this world because you've developed past it now, right? Like these childish things that still work for your younger brothers are not as enchanting to you as they once were. And that is partially sad, but also partially good, as we discussed earlier.
Yeah, very much is a story of Wendy getting a real close-up view of what it looks like to not grow up and deciding, oh, that's not actually what I want, is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like when they get back how her dad's like, I was a bit harsh. You can stay in the nursery as long as you want. She's like, no, I'm moving out.
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm done.
Yeah, when I was able to get my own room, I was on it. Didn't need to tell me twice.
I was very blessed and had my own room from the beginning. I'm very thankful for that. But yeah, I can't imagine why any kid wouldn't want their own room. So I like this psychological, what's it called? Reverse psychology, where they've tricked Wendy into wanting to stay in the nursery. And I'm very curious where they're just going to pull out a whole new room in their house that clearly they've lived in for a while and just make that Wendy's room. Like, where is she moving to?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of undercurrent in the book about, money and class and, finding enough room for all the children, especially once the Lost Boys show up and they're going to adopt all the Lost Boys as well.
But that's so sweet.
And sort of put them up in the drawing room for a while and, put a screen around them on, social occasions.
Don't look at the children. They're behind the screen.
Yes.
Aw. I like that the Darling family in the book becomes an orphanage of sorts. I mean, they also become a family, but they take all the orphans in.
Yeah, well, and actually, one of the lovely things about Peter Pan the book is that the royalties were given to the Greater Ormond Street Children's Hospital, which meant that for a very long time, as long as the copyright lasted in the UK, every sale of the book would go there. And there was actually a big contest in Britain when the copyright was going up to figure out who would write an official Ormond Street sequel, which ended up being called Peter Pan and Scarlet. And if you buy a copy of that, the proceeds go to the Greater Ormond Street Hospital. It is actually a much better sequel to Peter Pan than the really, really bad Dave Barrie prequels, which were written here in America when the American copyright went up, which was before the British copyright. And so the money does not go to any children's hospital. They were not published in Britain, and it introduces such ideas as, well, fairies, you see, are actually birds who got trapped in Neverland. And if you stay in Neverland long enough, the magic turns them into fairies, which...
That contradicts the original book.
It does. The original book has a perfect line, one of its many perfect lines that, the first time that a baby laughed, that laugh broke into 1,000 pieces, and that was the beginning of fairies. And that is a magical idea. Birds getting transformed by, Fantasyland magic into fairies is just too literal and too dumb.
Bird. Yes, unfortunately, when you said that line, I was just thinking of the seagulls in Finding Nemo turning into fairies, and I don't want those. I mean, I want one just to see what it would look like, but I just don't think that is going to turn out well for anyone.
Should we talk about Tinkerbell, speaking of fairies?
I do love Tinkerbell.
Such an iconic image, part of the Disney brand for so long.
It amazes me how incredibly sassy and confident and with such agency she has in this first film, and then what they kind of turn her into decades later for their CG films, where she's this quiet, sweet, demure sort of, oh my goodness, I will never be very good at anything, or I'm just a tinkerer, blah, 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 blah. And it's a completely different character, and it makes me very sad. I rather enjoy the original.
Yeah. Is she a little murderous? Is she a little jealous? Yes.
But she's very open and honest about it.
Yeah, she does not hide who she is.
So she has a very different personality in this movie than any of her subsequent personalities.
Mm-hmm.
But I do very much love one of the lines in the original book about how fairies are only big enough to hold one emotion at one time. And I think that this Tinkerbell shows us that very, very well.
Mm-hmm.
Where she, in fact, turns red when she is angry.
Mm-hmm. A little addendum to my note about the designs earlier.
Oh, okay.
The designs in this film, I think, are just... I understand why they are very clean and bold. It's easier to animate that way. But I feel like there's so many really beautifully illustrated versions of Peter Pan, which I own a few. And one of the things that is so lovely about those is the certain organic quality to them. The way that, Peter's often in a tunic made of leaves, and the Lost Boys are kind of have a ramshackle quality of, sewn together pelts and things. And there's something very lively and organic about the world of Neverland in a lot of the illustrations that I'm familiar with. And this movie doesn't quite have that organic quality. It's very straight and clean and cartoony, which I get from a production perspective, but it's less evocative to me.
This is true. I mean, now that I'm thinking about it and imagining the characters in my head, I realize that it's really color blocking is the design. Like, everyone is a solid color pretty much, aside from Peter Pan, who gets a lighter green top and darker green tights.
Yeah.
Everyone else is pretty much a solid color because everyone's in nightgowns, which is very efficient for just making them a box.
Yep.
And then they each are color coded.
Mm-hmm.
So John is white, Michael's pink, Wendy's blue. The Lost Boys are a kind of autumnal selection of colors. I hadn't realized that before, but they are just color blocks.
Yeah.
Also, I'm realizing that, you should very much understand why I collect copies of Alice in Wonderland if you've collected copies of Peter Pan.
Yeah, but all the Alice in Wonderlands have the same illustrations.
But they have beautiful covers. So beautiful covers. Also, there's one version that I do want to hunt down, and it's illustrated using paintings by Salvador Dali. I really want it. I think it sounds cooler than it actually is, but I want it very badly. I just want the melting clocks is all I really want.
Apparently the short story Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens was at one point released with illustrations by Arthur Rackham, which I really should get my hand on. Arthur Rackham is an amazing illustrator in the kind of block print, black and white Art Nouveau style. Okay. He illustrated some Arthurian. He's done some work on Le Morte d'Arthur. Really gorgeous.
Okay. I can imagine that in my head a little bit.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And there's an illustrated version of Peter and Wendy by Trina Schart Hyman. It's one of my favorite children's illustrators who just has these kind of elongated, elegant figures. He's got that kind of loose, organic quality that I like. And I guess I just have different iconic visions of these characters, and this movie doesn't do it for me in many ways.
But it does make them incredibly easy to animate.
It does. I would not want to animate someone dressed in leaves.
Me neither.
That would be awful.
Yeah. I feel like everyone would expect me to hate Tinkerbell's design, and actually, I do really love it. I think it's pretty great. I love that she gets hips.
And measures them on screen.
Yes, isn't it funny that we think of her as this absolutely beautiful, gorgeous thing, and she does get screen time where she's, essentially criticizing her own appearance, which is sad and funny when it's her hips that keep her inside the drawer. She would fit if not for her hips. Also, perhaps in this viewing, my favorite character in Peter Pan is the crocodile, because the crocodile is just really into snacks. And
you identify with
the
that.
crocodile's emotions about snacks, I highly identify with. So all of the speeding around in the water like Scooby-Doo and splashing the water and waiting and dancing. I feel that. That very hard. I get you, crocodile.
Yeah, we'll say that, the pirate world of this movie is more complex than I remembered. We sort of start off with a knockoff Yo-Ho, Yo-Ho, A Pirate's Life for me, although I guess maybe other way around.
Other way around, because this comes out before Disneyland opens. Disneyland doesn't open until 1954, and this comes out in 1953.
And I guess the whole crew is really eager to get out and do some actual pirating, but
they open with a song about, why it's so great to be a pirate's life is a wonderful life. And now I'm really confused why it wasn't the same song.
Yeah, I own the rights.
Yeah, I mean, A Pirate's Life for me is more catchy, So, but what made them...
It feels like the first draft for A Pirate's Life.
I guess. Did they look at it and go, this isn't catchy enough? We need a new song. So write me another song about a pirate's life for me with a lot of yo-hos. Because they say that a lot too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't realize how badly the pirate crew really wanted to set sail away from Neverland. I realized there's a whole half of this movie that went completely over my head as a kid because I was not catching the dialogue at all. And everything the pirates say, never noticed before. Also never noticed that Mr. Smee was trying really, really, really hard to talk Captain Hook into setting sail and making Captain Hook think that it was his idea. Like, it's such a refrain throughout the movie, and I never noticed this before.
Yeah, Smee really comes off as Hook's therapist, trying as best he can to, maybe this isn't a healthy obsession of yours. Maybe you should go back to doing other things that you love.
As Mr. Smee drinks an entire bottle of wine by himself. A lot of drinking in this movie. A lot of violence and death or implied death. Wow.
Lots of shooting.
Yeah.
Lots of sword fights.
It's a standards and practices nightmare.
Yeah. Could not get away with this.
Absolutely not, no. They actually get to use their swords.
And, maybe part of the reason that this film just doesn't quite light up the screen for me is that we actually have just a lot of different versions of these characters, some of which really do come alive in more exciting ways. Like, Hook is a big, messy movie, but there are some great things about it, like really great things about it. And top of that list is like Dustin Hoffman and Hook and Dennis Hoskins as Smee. Like, they are such vibrant characters, and they just they have such a great rapport and such great energy. And compared to that, this feels just a little bit cold.
Well, but this is the tee upon which, Hook is the golf ball.
Yeah.
Right? It's just teeing them up for later to build on these characters, which I think is works well. I really enjoyed watching Captain Hook and Mr. Smee in this. I enjoyed them much more than I ever did as a kid. As a kid, I was kind of like, okay, get through this part so we can get back to Peter Pan. But I enjoyed them quite a bit. One thing that I realized, and has never bothered me before, but now bothers me, is that at the end of the film, where Captain Hook and Mr. Smee have dropped the present, quote-unquote, from Wendy down to Peter Pan, he's waiting till 6 o'clock to open it, and Tinkerbell comes in and says, "Don't do it, man, don't do it!" And it blows up, and he's crawling through the wreckage to get to Tinkerbell. We just cut away. And we cut to see what's happening on the pirate ship. And like, oh no, everyone's been captured and they're in ropes. Peter Pan will save us. And then Peter Pan and Tinkerbell just show up like everything is fine. I'm like, wait a second, that is not where we left the scene. We left it with Tinkerbell's light going out. How did she get better?
Yeah, the imaginary audience clapped to claim they believe in fairies. And
I'm just saying, you don't normally leave someone on their deathbed and then cut to them like totally fine,
Yeah, I think that is an example of this movie not coming up with the creative solution maybe it should have, because that moment in the plot is an iconic version, especially in the stage play, where the audience is asked to like clap to prove that they believe in fairies, because if you believe in fairies, then maybe Tinkerbell can be cured. The book does a similar thing where Peter turns and addresses all the children in the world and asks if they believe in fairies, and because they're all sleeping and therefore very close to Neverland, and they can respond, and many do. Some hiss, which, Tinkerbell's really angry about. And the 2003 film sort of has a moment where, he proclaims, "I do believe in fairies, I do," and then you sort of cut to all the different characters in the movie all over being caught up in this moment of like joy of belief in fairies, and that brings her back. But this movie just doesn't come up with a solution to how to do that in a film form.
Yes, that particular film, I was at an age where we just glommed onto that, and so we would run around, shrieking, "I do believe in fairies! I do! Over and over and over, endlessly. I'm so glad that I'm alive today. But I was just thinking, there was something that I read recently that was the reason Walt didn't put that into the film is supposedly because during a showing of Bambi, when Bambi's running around going, Mother, where are you? Where are you, Mother? Someone in the theater was just like, here I am, Bambi. And he was, so hurt and heartbroken that, like, someone would ruin this moment that he did not feel like it was a good idea to put something like that for Tinkerbell into the films for people to mock. So that's why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, that the dude in the theater who, like, ruins the experience for everyone else. That is exactly why we can't have
Please
nice
never
things.
be that man.
That's who Peter Pan grows up to be. So maybe it's best he doesn't grow up.
No, he wouldn't. He loves Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell is his best friend.
Who is in love with him.
I mean, welcome to a lot of girls' experiences.
Mm-hmm. In the end, we all live happily ever after. We get to commandeer a pirate ship, cover it in fairy dust, and fly it back to London, which is a pretty cool image.
It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I think that is one of my favorite images from the film, is the golden ship.
Yeah. It's really lovely.
Yeah. And it is a really, really nice moment when Wendy is looking out the window with her parents at the cloud ship. And it actually, they do a very, very nice job of not making it a cloud literally shaped just like a ship. Like, it has enough of that cloudy quality as it dissipates into something else. Or is my favorite part the You Can Fly song. That is a great sequence.
It is. For sure. I like the way that music starts off in that kind of slower place and then picks up and becomes more sprightly as they learn to fly and twirl. And it is a lovely little sequence.
It is. It just stinks that you need an entire chorus to sing it. Like, it's not something that you can really accomplish by yourself, in the shower or the kitchen or wherever you like to do your singing. Yeah, it's a tough karaoke song, let me tell you.
So what do you think the moral is of Peter Pan?
I thought I'm supposed to ask you that question because...
Well, you can.
What is the moral of Peter Pan?
I feel like it's a movie that kind of wants to have its cake and eat it too. It's like...
But you can! You can have cake and eat it too! It doesn't make sense. If you have cake, you can eat it.
And then you won't have it anymore.
Yes, because you ate it. So then you had cake and then you ate it. So you did both. Yes,
but you cannot both have cake and be eating it, I suppose. You can't...
The whole point of having cake is to eat it. One does not just want to have cake to hold cake.
Some people are really into cake and just like looking
They
at
aren't.
it.
That is incorrect.
It's like those pillows. You'd think the point of pillows is to lean on pillows, but no. Maybe that's the analogy we need for you. You can't both have beautiful pillows and sleep on them too.
The moral of Peter Pan is mothers are the real heroes. That's the moral. Mothers are the real heroes.
That is absolutely true to the film and the book and everything. Yeah, I do think that the film sort of wants to both say, yes, you should grow up, and also, no, you shouldn't.
Yeah, you should always keep that little sprightly child inside your heart.
Yes, I think the moral is have the imagination of a child, but the love and care and responsibility of an adult.
You can have both.
You can.
In
it's
fact,
possible.
They are better paired together. That's a good moral. I'll take it. Is that all, folks?
I think that's all, folks.
All right. Thanks for listening. And if you enjoyed our podcast today, you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. You can also write us at retroscoping@gmail.com or find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram as Retroscoping. And next time, we will be talking about The Lady and the Tramp.
And until then,
go live happily ever after. I had some scotch while you were gone. In honor of J.M. Barrie.